My name is Avery Collins. I used to believe that life was made up of certainties, black and white decisions, yes or no answers. But then I met Noah James, and everything I thought I knew about life and love and the space between yes and no shattered into a million tiny maybes. It's been exactly 365 days since I last saw his face, since I walked away from the only person who ever made me feel like I was enough, like I was more than enough. And I've spent every single one of those days wondering if I made the right choice. They say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Time just teaches you how to live with the pain, how to breathe around the hole in your chest where your heart used to be. I sit alone in my apartment, rain pounding against my windows like it's trying to break in. Seattle in November is a special kind of melancholy, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes a home there. I stare at my phone, at the last text message he ever sent me. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes, because some people are worth waiting for. I never replied. I couldn't. How do you respond to hope when you're drowning in doubt? How do you say yes when you're terrified of what happens after? The rain falls harder, matching the rhythm of my scattered thoughts. I take another sip of wine, letting the bitterness coat my tongue. It tastes like regret, like all the words I should have said but didn't. He will remember the day we met like it was yesterday, not 3 years ago. It was a Tuesday, ordinary in every way. Until it was. I was late for work, rushing into the coffee shop on the corner of Pike and 4th, my hair still wet from the shower, my mind already at the office, already buried under the mountain of paperwork waiting for me. The usual. Alina asked from behind the counter. She'd been serving me my morning coffee for 2 years, large Americano, extra shot, splash of almond milk. Please, I nodded, fumbling through my purse for my wallet. That's when I realized I'd left it at home, tucked into the back pocket of the jeans I'd decided against wearing at the last minute. The story of my life, always changing my mind at the worst possible moment. I'm so sorry, I said, embarrassment heating my cheeks. I forgot my wallet. I'll have to skip today. I've got it, a voice said from behind me. I turned to find myself staring into the bluest eyes I'd ever seen, the kind of blue that makes you think of summer skies and possibilities. Oh, no, I stammered. That's not necessary. I insist, he smiled, and that's when I noticed the dimple in his right cheek, just asymmetrical in the most perfect way. Consider it my good deed for the day. I don't take charity from strangers, I said, but there was no edge to my voice. Noah, he said, extending his hand. Noah James. And you are? Avery, I replied, my hand disappearing into his. Avery Collins. See, he grinned. Not strangers anymore. I should have known then. I should have seen the warning signs flashing behind those ocean eyes. Because Noah James was a tidal wave, and I was about to be swept away. Alina handed us our coffees, a knowing smirk playing at the corner of her lips. She'd witnessed countless fleeting connections in that coffee shop, but something told me this wasn't going to be one of them. Thank you, I said, gesturing with my cup. I'll pay you back tomorrow. Or, Noah suggested, his voice casual but his eyes anything but. You could pay me back tonight. Dinner? There's a new Thai place on 7th that's supposed to be amazing. I should have said no. I had a rule about dating, or rather, not dating. 3 years of focusing on my career, of putting myself first after a relationship that had left me hollow, had taught me that love was a distraction I couldn't afford. But there was something about Noah that made me want to break all my rules. Okay, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop it. Dinner sounds nice. His smile widened, that single dimple deepening. Great. I'll meet you here at 7. I nodded, already wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Little did I know, I was agreeing to the beginning of the end. Or maybe it was the end of the beginning. With Noah, the lines always blurred. That night changed everything. One dinner turned into 2, then 3, then weekends spent exploring the city, finding hidden bookstores and hole-in-the-wall restaurants that served the kind of food that made you close your eyes in bliss with every bite. Noah was an architect, passionate about creating spaces that felt like home. He saw beauty in the most unexpected places, in cracked sidewalks and rusted fire escapes, in the way light filtered through leaves. You're doing it again, I said one evening, 3 months into whatever we were. We were sitting on his balcony, the city lights spread out below us like fallen stars. His eyes had been on me for the past 5 minutes. Doing what? He asked, his fingers tracing lazy circles on the inside of my wrist, looking at me like I'm one of your buildings, like you're trying to figure out how I'm structured. He laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. Is that what you think I'm doing? Isn't it? No, he said softly, his eyes never leaving mine. I'm looking at you like you're a miracle. Because you are. Avery Collins, you're the most miraculous thing that's ever happened to me. That's when I felt it, the first crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. It was terrifying and exhilarating. For 2 years, we existed in our own perfect bubble. Noah taught me how to trust again, how to open myself up to the possibility of love without fear of breaking. Or at least with less fear. We moved in together after a year. His apartment, with a balcony and the view that made me feel like I could see forever. We adopted a cat, a one-eyed stray that Noah found huddled under a dumpster during a rainstorm. We named him Cyclops, but called him Cy for short. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just existing. I was living, really living, and it was beautiful, until it wasn't. The call came on a Thursday. I was at work, buried in case files, when my phone rang. "Ms. Collins?" a voice I didn't recognize asked. "Yes, this is Seattle Presbyterian Hospital. We have your father here. He's had a heart attack." The world tilted on its axis. My father, the man who had raised me alone after my mother died, the man who worked 2 jobs so I could go to college, the man who taught me to be strong, to be independent, to never rely on anyone but myself. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember calling Noah, but he was there, holding my hand as the doctor explained that my father needed bypass surgery, that he would need care during his recovery, months of care. "He can stay with us," Noah said without hesitation. "We'll make it work." But my father lived in Phoenix, had lived there since I moved to Seattle for law school 6 years earlier. His entire life was there, his friends, his routines, the house he'd shared with my mother. "He can't leave Phoenix," I said, the weight of what that meant settling over me like a shroud. "I have to go to him." Noah's face fell, but only for a moment before he nodded. "Then we'll go to Phoenix." Of course," he said, as if there was no other option, as if following me across the country was the most natural thing in the world. "I'll talk to the firm tomorrow, see if they'll let me work remotely. If not, I'll find something in Phoenix. There are buildings that need designing everywhere." But I knew what he'd be giving up, the promotion he'd been working toward for years, the dream project he'd just been assigned, the life we'd built in Seattle. "I can't ask you to do that," I whispered. "You're not asking," he said, his voice firm. "I'm offering. Because that's what people do when they love each other, Avery. They show up, they make sacrifices, they choose each other every day, no matter what. But as I looked at him, at the life shining in his eyes, at all the dreams he had that didn't include moving to Phoenix to take care of my sick father, I knew I couldn't let him make that sacrifice. I need to do this alone, I said, the words burning my throat like acid. Why? He asked, confusion clouding his features. We're a team, Avery. Let me help you. Because I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, I don't know how long I'll be gone. It could be months, maybe longer, and I can't ask you to put your life on hold for me. You are my life, he said simply, and that's when I felt it, the weight of his love, the responsibility of it. What if I failed him? What if he resented me for taking him away from his dreams? What if I wasn't worth the sacrifice? I need time, I whispered her. Space, to figure this out. Okay, he nodded, but I could see the hurt in his eyes, the fear. Take all the time you need, I'll be here when you get back. I flew to Phoenix the next day. Noah drove me to the airport, Sai meowing plaintively from his carrier in the back seat. I'll take good care of him, Noah promised, as we stood at the security checkpoint. And he'll take good care of me. I nodded, tears threatening to spill over. I'll call when I land. I love you, he said, his voice breaking on the last word. I love you too, I whispered, and I did, more than I'd ever loved anyone. Oh, more than I thought possible. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose between the person you love and the person you're responsible for, between your heart and your duty. My father's recovery was slow, complicated. What should have been a few months turned into 6, then 8, then a year. Noah and I tried to make it work. Daily phone calls, weekend visits when he could get away from work. But the distance wore on us. On him. I could hear it in his voice, see it in his eyes when we video chatted. The strain, the longing, the uncertainty. When are you coming home? He asked during one of his hits. The question hanging between us like a physical thing. I don't know, I answered honestly. My father was still struggling, still needed me. Soon, I hope. But we both knew soon was a lie, a beautiful, hopeful lie. The fights started small. Miscommunications, missed calls, the natural result of trying to love someone from 1,000 miles away. But they grew, metastasized into something ugly and painful. I can't do this anymore, Noah said during our last fight. Not yelling, that would have been easier. His voice was quiet, defeated. I can't keep loving someone who won't let me in, who won't let me help, who keeps pushing me away. I'm not pushing you away, I argued, but the words rang hollow even to my own ears, because I was. Had been since the moment I chose to leave Seattle without him. Aren't you? He asked, because from where I'm standing, it feels like you've been looking for a reason to run since the day we met. His words hit me like a physical blow, because they were true. I had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the moment when he realized I wasn't worth fighting for, wasn't worth waiting for. That's not fair, I whispered. None of this is fair, he said, but at some point, we have to decide if what we're fighting for is worth the fight, and I don't think you've made that decision yet. I love you, I said, tears streaming down my face. I know you do, he sighed, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you have to choose it. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. We left it there, in that painful, uncertain space between breaking up and holding on, between goodbye and see you soon, between no and yes. The next day, he sent that text. I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes, because some people are worth waiting for. And I never replied. I convinced myself it was for the best, that I was setting him free, of giving him the chance to find someone who could give him what he deserved, someone whole, someone who wasn't torn between two lives, two loves. But the truth is, I was terrified that if I went back, if I chose him, I would lose my father, and if I lost my father, I would never forgive myself. Or worse, that I would resent Noah for making me choose, that the love we had would spoil under the weight of that resentment. So I let him go, or at least, I tried to. My father improved slowly, and then all at once, like he'd been waiting for something to click back into place, he met a woman in his cardiac rehabilitation group, Margaret, a widow with kind eyes and a laugh that made my father smile for the first time in years. 2 months ago, he told me he didn't need me anymore, not like before. You've got your own life to live, Avery, he said, his eyes clear and knowing. Your own love to fight for. I didn't ask how he knew about Noah. Fathers always know. So I packed up my temporary life in Phoenix, said goodbye to the desert sunsets and the dry heat that had become familiar, and I came back to Seattle, back to the rain and the coffee shops and the life I'd left behind, but not back to Noah. I couldn't. Not yet, not until I knew for sure what I wanted, what I was willing to fight for. I found a small apartment, got my old job back, tried to pretend that my heart wasn't constantly searching for a glimpse of him on every street corner, in every coffee shop, and now, a year to the day since I walked away, I'm sitting in my empty apartment, staring at a text message I never answered, wondering if I've made the biggest mistake of my life. The rain continues to fall, relentless against my windows. I take another sip of wine and set the glass down, pick up my phone, stare at his number, my thumb hovering over the call button. What would I even say? I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I stayed away. I'm sorry I was too afraid to choose. The words seem inadequate, too small for the magnitude of what I feel, for the regret that has become my constant companion. But then I remember what Noah always said, that sometimes the simplest words are the most honest, that truth doesn't need embellishment. Before I can talk myself out of it, I press call. 1 ring, 2, 3 seconds stretches into eternity. Each ring a reminder of the time I've wasted, the love I've squandered. And then, a click, silence, and his voice. That voice that has haunted my dreams for a year. Avery? A question, a hope. Noah, I breathe, his name a prayer on my lips. I'm home. Are you, he asks, and I can hear the urgency in his voice. The need. I give him my address, hands shaking as I end the call. 20 minutes. That's how long it takes for a knock to sound at my door. 20 minutes of pacing and doubting and hoping. I open the door, and there he is, soaking wet from the rain. His blue eyes exactly as I remember them, maybe a little sadder, a little wiser. We stare at each other for what feels like years, neither of us speaking, neither of us moving. And then, he breaks the silence. You didn't answer my text, he says, his voice hoarse, raw. I know, I whisper. I was afraid. Of what? Of everything, I admit. Of losing you. Of keeping you. Of not being enough. Of being too much. Of the space between maybe and yes. He steps closer, close enough that I can feel the heat radiating from him despite his wet clothes. Close enough that I can smell the rain on his skin. Close, but not touching. Not yet. And now, he asks, what are you afraid of now? I take a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past year. of all my doubts and fears and regrets, lifting from my shoulders, because the answer is simple. It always has been. Nothing, I say, the truth of it, settling in my bones. I'm not afraid anymore, because I know what I want, who I want. I want you, Noah. I've always wanted you. His smile is slow, cautious, that dimple appearing like an old friend. I've missed you, he says simply. I've missed you too, I whisper, more than I can say, more than I allowed myself to admit. He reaches out, his hand finding mine, our fingers intertwining like they were made to fit together, like no time has passed at all. We have a lot to talk about, he says, a lot to figure out. I know, I nod, and we will, I promise. I'm not running anymore. I'm here, I'm all in. He pulls me to him then, his arms wrapping around me like coming home, his heartbeat steady against mine. I never stopped waiting, he whispers into my hair, never stopped hoping. I'm sorry it took me so long, I say, against his chest. He pulls back, just enough to look into my eyes. The time doesn't matter, only this moment does, only us. And then he kisses me, and it's like the past year disappears, like all the pain and distance and doubt were just a bad dream. His lips on mine taste like forgiveness, like second chances, like the promise of tomorrow. When we break apart, both breathless, I rest my forehead against his. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I love you too, he says. Always have. Always. And in that moment, standing in the doorway of my small apartment, rain still falling outside, I understand what Noah has known all along. That love isn't about certainties. It's not black and white. It's about the maybe, the possibilities, the space between fear and courage, between doubt and faith. It's about choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And as Noah leads me inside, his hand warm in mine, I know that whatever comes next, that our challenges we face, we'll face them together, in the beautiful, terrifying, exhilarating space between maybe and yes, in the space where love lives, where we live, together, finally. If Avery and Noah's journey touched your heart today, remember that all great love stories deserve to be shared. Just like Avery found the courage to reach out after a year of silence, I hope you'll reach out too by hitting that like button and subscribing to this channel. In the space between maybe and yes, between watching and subscribing, there lies the possibility of more stories that will move you, inspire you, and remind you that second chances are always worth fighting for. Share this with someone who needs to hear that love is worth the risk. And join me next week for another journey into the heart. Because just like Noah waited for Avery, I'll be here waiting for you. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the courage to say I'm home.